This is ChangeMakers with Katie Goar, finding the right solutions for the affordable housing community.
Today's changemaker is Evan Holladay, the founder and CEO of Holladay Ventures. He has led more than $694 million in affordable workforce and mixed income developments built around intentional design and strong community partnerships. He also mentors emerging developers through Affordable Housing Development Mastery and the Real Estate Developer Academy. And we're going to get into more about that in a few minutes. But first, Evan, welcome to the ChangeMakers podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Katie. Excited to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you. We've had a few developers in the past, and it's always such an enlightening conversation because everybody wants to build our way out of this affordable housing crisis. And you guys bring some realism to why that may not necessarily be the full solution. So I'm excited to get right into this. First, though, I usually like to ask our guests, how in the world did you come to this magnificent, frustrating yet rewarding industry? So why don't you start us off there?
Yes, yeah, all the above. I was lucky, fortunate, blessed to figure out what I wanted to do in college. I stumbled into it in a way, but I really wanted to. So I was going to school for pre-med. Thought I wanted to be a doctor, and learned very quickly, like within the first semester, I was like, all right, science and chemistry is not my thing. I'm not in this. I want to help people, but it doesn't need to be through medicine. And so I was looking around for what I could do. And at the same time, there was a big student housing development announced on campus, and it was going to change the campus. It was more of a commuter school, is turning into a residential school. And this was really an impetus for that. And I was like, man, that excites me. Like, I want to be a part of that. And I was drawn into it. And so I mentioned it to people I knew just offhand. And one of my mentors, he said, well, I know the developer. How about I introduce you? And it didn't just click right away. The developer's like, all right, well, prove yourself. Show me your value. And he's like, get people out to my groundbreaking. So I convinced my buddies. I gave them pizza. In return, they passed out flyers for his groundbreaking. And that's really how I got my foot in the door to development. I still had to call the guy like every week, be like, hey, I helped you out with the groundbreaking. Anything else I can help you out with? And I finally was given that opportunity to basically help him lease up the units. We leased up 355 beds in 5 months. And I was 19 years old in college. Like, I knew nothing, but I was just excited, and I wanted to be valuable to somebody else. And through that experience, I realized, I was like, one, this is so cool. Like, I was there as they were framing the building, leasing it up.
Oh, wow.
And two, I realized, like, through that process, I started to get a good relationship with the developer. And I mentioned, I was like, hey, the lobbies, I looked at the plans, the lobbies, you have a lobby on every floor at the elevator. There's no windows. There's a wall right there. I was like, why don't you, be nice to have some natural light? And he's like, you know what? That's a good idea. And 2 weeks later, there are windows being put in on each floor in the lobby. And it just shattered my glass. And I was like, wow, I can actually, the small details actually make a big difference. And I can, my voice matters, and I can actually, have an impact on this development. So from that point, I was hooked. I was like, all right, I want to be a developer. I want to put the deal together like he did. And then at the same time, I volunteered for a nonprofit doing amazing work, helping single parents, usually single mothers, go back and get their college degree. They're called Family Scholar House.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Kathy Dykstra, the executive director, she would be an amazing guest, side note. But
I'm writing that down right now, actually.
yeah, she was a huge inspiration for me because I saw the work. I was literally a freshman in college, and I saw the work that they were doing and the impact that they were having on so many families, like helping give them a safe space, a community, a support system, after school programs for the kids. So that would give the parents, the mothers, enough time to go to class and get a better degree, to get a better paying job. And that really opened me up to be like, wow, you can help people through real estate. And so I knew when I learned about that, I was like, all right, affordable housing, I can help people and I can build things. The affordable housing is that combination. And I just, from that moment, I dove all in. And I knew that's what I wanted to do, something within impact real estate. And I found my space to do that. And so from there, I was part of an entrepreneur program in school, and they told us to start a business. And it was really just supposed to be, for a class. But I convinced my team to do a modular housing development company centered around sustainable and affordable mixed income housing. And so we had houseboat manufacturing plants that had laid off 1,100 skilled workers with the housing market crash. And we
Uh-huh.
figured out a way to basically build in the same factories, build the same box, and just put it on a foundation instead of on water. And we ended up winning some competitions, and we're like, wow, maybe we have something here. And so we started to really create it as a business model. And I was looking for groups to partner with and really just wanted to get my foot in the door. So I started applying for every affordable developer and really just developer in general. I was like, I just want to get my foot in that door, that first opportunity to work at a developer. And as luck would have it, I was just trying to put myself in the right room with the right people. And I ended up hearing that one of the biggest developers in Louisville at the time was playing this golf outing. And I'm terrible at golf, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to try to connect with these guys, in person while I'm also applying for a job. And, basically one of the guys on their foursome in the golf outing got sick. And so I was able to get in a all-day golf outing with the owner of the development company that I was trying to get hired by. And somehow I played the best golf of my life. And, we became, built a great relationship over 18 holes. And again, a terrible at golf, but somehow, when the moment rose, was able to build that relationship through that time together. And they saw my passion, they saw my commitment for it, and they saw, what I was doing with the modular, and they gave me an opportunity. And, forever grateful for that, because they week one threw me in the deep end. They're like, hey, go figure out how to do a 9% deal in Brownsville, Texas. I had just turned 23, and I was like, I don't know where Brownsville, Texas is, but I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to, get the lay of the land and see what the city needs. And so I was on a plane 6 days later and, was meeting with the city manager and meeting with brokers and driving McAllen and Brownsville, Texas, trying to find opportunities. And that's, eventually was able to cut my teeth there at that company and work there for 6 years. And then eventually decided there was, I wanted to do things differently and do it our own way and with our own way of impact. And that's when we started Holladay Ventures.
Two things you said that I find interesting, and it's something that you hear a lot, but I like how you framed it. Is one, you said, I just needed to get my foot in the door. And then two, you said, I just needed to figure it out. And those are sort of like the epic ways for people to learn, for people to demonstrate and get into industries and, get promoted and, all of these other things. But those phrases really capture the combination of hustle, grit, talent, and timing. And I view those as like just such a secret sauce for how people can navigate challenges or how people can start businesses. And
Right.
this naturally leads me into what you're doing. And I want to talk about the Affordable Housing Development Mastery Program and the Academy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So when we first started Holladay Ventures, really before we did, I really had a desire to learn from others. I wanted to continue my education, and not just within real estate, just with all aspects of life, with entrepreneurship, with impact, with helping others, and learning from successful people. And I used basically a tool that I knew could get me into the door. Speaking of what we were just talking about, and that was a podcast.
Mhm.
Just like we're talking today. I realized I saw others doing it, where you could have conversations with amazing people and people that may not otherwise give you an hour of their time. And so I had met this venture capitalist, and basically, long story short, I really wanted an excuse to keep talking to him, but it was just a short conversation. And the idea of a podcast had been playing in my head.
Mhm.
And so I'm in the car with my wife, and I'm like, I really want to talk to him. Like, maybe I mentioned that I have a podcast, and I had no podcast. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna say it and see what he says. But I was so nervous. I was like sweating. I'm like, I'm getting like a little shaky just thinking about that moment because it was like such a nerve-wracking moment. But I shot my shot, and he said, "Yeah, I'd love to. Love to be on. Here's my card with my cell phone number." I was like, "Oh man, okay, I need to make a podcast now." And so that kind of snowballed into creating a very successful real estate and entrepreneur and impact podcast called Monumental. We did almost 200 episodes, and it was an amazing opportunity for me to not only build my network. It was my, like, I call it my like personal MBA because I learned so much from it, and it built my brand as an authority in the space, and being able to help and share information and share that knowledge with others in our audience. And so from that podcast, I had people reaching out to me all the time saying, "Hey, Evan, I love what you're doing. Like, I want to do what you're doing with Holladay Ventures and helping other people through housing and through real estate investment and doing it through affordable housing. But I don't feel like there's a great place to learn that. Like, where can I go to learn?"
Mhm.
And I didn't. I was like, I don't know. You could go to certain conferences, but they're a little high level for somebody that's just getting started that doesn't know, the terminology or doesn't know where to get started. And so, at the encouragement of my wife, who is a life coach, she said, "Why don't you coach people? Why don't you share your knowledge? You know so much about how to put together deals, and these people want to know, and you could help encourage and coach them through that process." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." And it kind of same thing. We pitched it before we even had the program, and we had people join, and they were so excited about joining. It was like, okay, well, now they've joined. We need to create the program. So that was end of 2020 when we first launched Affordable Development Mastery, and we had our first cohort go through in 2021. It was a 12-month program that basically takes people from, they're successful in real estate, have had success in other capacities within real estate, but want to
Mhm.
make the leap into impact driven real estate investing and real estate development through affordable housing. And and we really look for people like who have that impact driven mindset. And it's amazing how many people are out there that want to learn this craft and want to be a part of the solution to solving the housing crisis, but just don't know where to get started, or don't know where to break through the barrier of,
Yeah.
the high barrier to entry to get in our business. So we had a 12-month program. We had, basically 16 different video modules with all the steps of everything that we did. We were basically an open kimono of just sharing everything that we did to create thousands of units of affordable housing, and that were impact driven and sustainable in design and development. And we had guest experts come in. We had attorneys, we had property management, we had debt and equity, we had council members, like every aspect of the development process. We had those speakers come in. And then we also had, group coaching calls on an ongoing, like biweekly and monthly basis, where we check in, people bring up deal issues, and we group coach. And then I also help give feedback from my perspective as well. And then we also did a in-person 3-day event. So
Mhm.
we had them tour properties. Everybody got to meet each other. We got to, again, meet
Oh,
guest
that's
experts in
great.
person. And it was, we didn't know what to expect. I mean, we didn't know what to expect going into it. And we ended up having crazy demand. We had 25 people join the program from all over the country. And we have people today that are doing multiple deals or have completed multiple deals to this point because of that program. We had one lady who had never done affordable development won a grant from Enterprise
Mhm.
for female developer of color. I think it was a $400,000 startup grant that
Oh,
she
wow.
won while she was in the program.
Oh, great.
And basically utilized, we wrote her a letter of support, and she had the program as kind of her foundation. And she shared a lot about that in her application, and that really helped her be able to win that application and that grant. And that was the seed capital. Now she's working
Mhm.
on her third development right now.
I mean, it's a master's course in how to do things, but it's also a nudge and an affirmation for people. And I think that is you're creating that space by which they can be nudged to take the next step.
Right.
And when you go from, not to sort of like play this down, but when you go from high school to what your next step is, everybody's asking, what are you going to do? Where are you going? Are
Yeah.
you going into trade school, vocational? Do you have a job? Where are you going to college? Like everybody's asking the question, but then it sort of drops off. And so, but like if you're a professional in the industry, where's the nudge question? Like, okay, are you starting your business? Are you going to go out and do development? And that's a huge leap. And, but if you're dreaming it or if you have the skill set for it, like, where is the nudge? And so you guys are creating a platform that's doing more than just the nudge. You guys are really, really being able to support people and create the environment to do that. And that is amazingly impressive. It also
Thank you.
echoes to how you first got started too, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, I'm sure you see this a lot too. It's just there's kind of the old guard of development has been
Yep.
so tight knit, closed lipped, doesn't want to share because of fear of competition or fear of more people getting into affordable housing. And I don't think everybody has that mindset, but I think there's a lot of old guard that does have that mindset. And I feel like there is to have an abundance mindset in terms of like if really our big hairy audacious goal as a company and my own personal goal is to solve or help in solving the
Mhm.
housing crisis. And I know that Holladay Ventures and Evan Holladay are not going to do that alone. And so I want to, and I know that I have really valuable information from my experience and my exposure from my mentors and the deals I worked on. And so I want to be able to pass that on to the next generation of developers. And I feel like, my parents instilled in me from an early age, like, you know, help others, love others, take care of others. And so that shows in what our work is, but also we're realizing like we can help other people do this too. And we can expand our impact tenfold instead of trying to do it all ourselves.
And there's not a lot of people doing that, and we're losing a lot of that institutional knowledge as that old guard is sort of transitioning over too. So, I mean, I think of Ron Terwilliger with the Bipartisan Housing Center. He's one of the few that has created a forum by
Right.
which they are passing on that knowledge and they
Right.
are identifying goals and objectives, and that baton is passing over.
Right.
And
Right.
he's one of the few ones that's out there other than you guys. So great job on that. Let's talk about some of the development deals because you have Stonebridge Lofts and the Samaritan Recovery Project, I believe, were two that really caught my eye. But tell us about those and then, feel free to add some more. Now we talk about the nuts and bolts of Holladay Ventures here.
Yes. So Stonebridge Lofts, is a 311 unit affordable community based in Goodlettsville. It's a suburb of Nashville. And really, this one's pretty unique in a couple different ways. One is we have a pretty strong amount of retail. We have 11,500 square feet of retail on the first floor. And so we're currently filling those spaces, but we have a nail salon there. We're talking to a coffee shop. We're talking to early learning center, trying to figure out ways that we can provide truly that live, work, play
Hmm.
all in the same community. And above and beyond that, we wanted to figure out a way. This is a suburban style community with a standalone clubhouse. And we wanted to find a way to push the envelope of sustainability. And so we have this beautiful 5,000 square foot clubhouse with really tall ceilings, beautiful building, but we covered the roof in solar. And so that solar array goes 100% into 3 Tesla Powerwall batteries that we have inside the building. And that building is 100% powered by that solar. So it powers up the batteries during the day, and then the batteries power it at night. And that was important for us because we wanted to show that almost like as a pilot of saying like, look, as far as I know, this is the first 100% solar powered clubhouse in Tennessee. And we just wanted to push the envelope. There's sustainability is a lot more at the forefront on the coast.
Hmm.
But here in the Midwest, it's, trying to figure out in the Southeast, trying to figure out like, how do we help push the envelope towards sustainability? That's also another part of our mission. And so using that as an example was important for us. And we even have a solar education center inside the clubhouse because we wanted to show like, look, real-time data, you see the solar coming onto the solar panel or the sun coming onto the solar panel, going into the battery, and it gives you that real-time data. So a kid that lives in our community can go up to the screen and see with, an educational plaque right next to it of explaining exactly what's going on in layman's terms. So that hopefully that it can inspire, some of our community to, consider or think about sustainability. And that was also Amazon's first investment with a private investor in the Nashville market with their housing fund.
Right.
So they invested a little over $31 million into Stonebridge Lofts. So it was really a major investment for Nashville and a major commitment for Amazon in affordable housing in the market. And so it was a real domino for the market. And then you'd asked about Shelby House and Samaritan Recovery Community. This one's a really unique one because it came about by a nonprofit who owned a full city block, right, almost close to downtown Nashville. Views of the skyline, you could walk to downtown. They're so close. But they were turning people away. They were a substance abuse recovery nonprofit. They'd been operating for almost 60 years, but their buildings were dilapidated. They were all outdated. They were pretty much functionally obsolete, and they needed to either tear them down or, start new. But they constantly had a problem of they didn't have enough beds. They had tremendous need. They were really good at what they did, but they had to turn people away because they didn't have enough capacity. But they didn't know how to fundraise. They hadn't fundraised in decades. They had relied on federal and state grants. And so they didn't understand that part of it. And they basically got calls every day from market rate developers wanting to buy their land and pay them top dollar, but they wanted them to move off campus. And, they wanted them to move off. And they just said, that's a non-starter. Like
Hmm.
we have to be near the core of downtown. That's where our clients are. That's where the people we serve are. And so it basically came about through a conversation where like, hey, like this could potentially be affordable housing with a new recovery center.
Hmm.
And so we were able to basically, play Tetris with their side of a little bit of their land that was unused and be able to leverage the value of their land, plus the ability to leverage state, local, and federal grants, either for recovery or also for affordable housing. And we're able to build them a new facility that was more than double their capacity. We took them from 50 beds to 132 beds in their new building. A state-of-the-art building. As soon as they moved in, it's almost 2 years ago now. As soon as they moved in, they won 2 new grants for new services totaling $2.3 million of grant funds. And a big reason behind winning those grants was because one, they had the capacity
Right.
with their new facility, and two, they had momentum and a lot of energy behind what they were doing, and everybody saw it now because of their brand new building. And next door, we were able to create 195 affordable units from 30 to 80% AMI, and creating a bridge between those going through recovery, those that graduate through the recovery program and are ready for some independence, can then move into our most deeply affordable units at the 30% AMI level with vouchers. And so that was phase one. And then once we moved them into the new building, we were able to tear down their old building, and we're currently building out phase two, which is another 289 mixed income units.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I mean, both of those projects are amazing. And this second one really fascinates me because there are exactly what you described, nonprofits that are trying to focus and deliver their mission, but they don't know how to make the next level jump.
Right.
And I guess we could say it's another nudge factor, right? Like you guys
Yeah.
were really able to step into that gap And but not just like provide for them, but you're doing more affordable housing, you're doing mixed income, and I'm sure the surrounding neighborhood, and I'm sure that those surrounding businesses are thrilled with the before and after picture as well. Was there anything that was a obstacle that you were confronted with in that particular project that I mean, with every development project, I
Yeah.
know there's one that you just said, how are we going to jump this hurdle? So
Mhm.
what was that maybe, and then how did you guys jump the hurdle?
Oh man. So I think Shelby House SRC, I think we must have had like 30 of those hurdles. Um, we it was the project was started in late 2019 in terms of pre-development. So
Yep.
we went through the ringer with COVID. Also, a week before COVID, there was a major tornado that hit Nashville, and this was like 3 or 4 blocks away from our site. So between the tornado and between COVID,
Yep.
a lot of the and a lot of the public funding that we were already in talks with, like a TIF,
Hmm.
for example,
Yep.
we had political momentum for a TIF, and then COVID and tornado happened, and then that just went out the window. Everybody's like, "That's not priority right now. We got a bigger things to solve," which I totally understood, but it just was a major headwind for us. And so trying to figure out, between that and you know, or all of the impact on construction pricing, construction materials. I mean, there were so many twists and turns in our capital stack. We went from TIF to no TIF to no project-based vouchers to project-based vouchers to by the end of it, we had 16 different funding tools
Oh my gosh.
or grants or credits that were combined to make that development possible. We literally turned over every couch cushion and seat chair that we could find to make that development work, to overcome a lot of that. I mean, to give you one example, so we closed in December of 21. We finally got our capital stack right, and and January, our GC calls and they're like, "Hey, we had an allocation and allowance for lumber, and we're now 1 million over." And we're like,
Right.
"Okay, well, maybe it'll come down."
Yeah.
Well,
And
it actually
technically
went up.
nothing changed but price. Like, like
Yeah.
change, you guys weren't changing specs. Yeah.
No, yeah, it was the
Oh
same
yeah,
lumber
yeah.
package, and so we decided to wait. It was at 1 million. We decided to wait. It went up to 2.1.
Oh my
We're like,
gosh.
"Oh my gosh, we just lost another 1,000,001
Oh.
within a matter of weeks." And our contingency was 5%, was
Mhm.
2.3 million. So within 2 months of the project starting, we had wiped out 90% of our
Oh
contingency
my.
with a lumber
Yeah.
buyout, which,
Yeah.
added no value to the building.
Right.
So it was a lot of twists and turns like that. We had major supply chain issues throughout construction. Project was delayed significantly. But I think one thing that I will say was helpful throughout this process was, one, we did not give up in terms of figuring out new funding sources. Like even during construction, we applied for or were granted another 6 million of grant funding that we didn't have in our cap stack before. And then we were also had great partners. I think that's super important with all the twists and turns. We had a really great co-development partner in Evergreen Real Estate. And then also our nonprofit partner was, willing and able to, stomach all the ebbs and flows of development. And then also we had great public partners. The state agency helped pitch in part of that 6 million was from the state agency. We had additional funding come from Metro, additional funding come from the housing authority. Like everybody stepped up, because they knew this was not something
Yeah.
that we brought upon ourselves. It was
Right.
exterior.
Right.
So it took all of that to come together, but now it's a finished product and is really helping a lot of lives now.
Mhm. I had a high ranking person ask me a couple months ago. They said, and they were talking about the affordable housing crisis. And they said, I'm hearing that, developers, and, this is a huge generalization question, but I'm hearing developers are having a hard time building fast enough because of regulations. And I said, that's a little bit true. Yes, we need to make it easier, still compliant, but yet easier. But then I went on to talk about more than just that. But how would is there a particular bottleneck in the process that you think, if you were going to wave the development wand here, that you think should be happening or should not be happening? Like what is it going to make, what is easier for you guys to build more, build better, build faster? Is there a particular thing that you could point to or a series of things?
Yeah. How much time do we have?
Right.
Yeah, so many things. I think, well, like you alluded to, there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a many different approaches. But I've made content about this on YouTube, and I love talking about this because I think there's so many different angles. But I think it comes down to a couple different categories. I think it comes down to the front end, the pre-development process,
Mhm.
and throughout that process, like, that is the riskiest portion of development. And that's what discourages new development, is the amount of risk. And time usually equals risk. It's time and cost is, your two biggest risks. And so how do we minimize cost and how do we minimize time on the pre-development side? Because that is the impetus, or that is the hurdle to getting to the actual construction of new units, which that's a whole nother bucket. But just focusing on pre-development, I think it's zoning. We have to
Right.
take, I know cities and states are now actually some are taking pretty massive action on this. You see Florida doing their Live Local Act. You see Texas having recently passed something last summer similar to that. You see Montana doing it. You see cities doing it all over, where they do by right zoning for more density on single family lots. We see, like, in Nashville, they just passed, you can have a single stairwell. We previously had 2 stairwell requirements for small
Mhm.
multifamily, and it's just cost prohibitive, right? So if you only have 12 units, why would you build 2 staircases? And it's proven that it's no more or less safe
Mhm.
than as long as it's sprinklered. The sprinklers usually are the most safe part of it. So it's looking at, like, stairwells, it's looking at setbacks, it's looking at zoning. I know California just passed, and this was in one of my videos. I was like, why don't we incentivize development right next to transit? And
Mhm.
why doesn't the federal government say, hey, if you want our federal transit dollars, then in order to get that, a preemptive, thing that you would need to check the box is have by right, higher density, mixed use, and
Mhm.
allowing multifamily near transit stops. And it's just things like that. It's just common sense, right? Or at least to most people, that seems like common sense of, like, hey, if we're going to have transit, then we should probably have a little bit more people living near there. And usually we're only putting transit on what is already a major corridor already. And so thinking about how do we do common sense things that align with where a community is headed. And if we have strong leadership from the council members to the mayor to the governor to even at the federal level, to look at how do we do, and also in a lot of cases we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, there are states out there that are already doing this.
Mhm.
It's just getting some of the states that are a little slower to adopt, getting them, up to the plate where the other
Right.
states are already working. So I think that's, zoning, for example, that can cost us 8 to 12 months of development time. And so those are an additional 8 to 12 months that we can't create more units.
Mhm.
And that's an 8 to 12-month window of high risk.
Mhm.
And we're spending 100 to $200,000 on architects, on engineers, on surveys, on the zoning. And so that is a massive high barrier for any developer to go after. And it's an opportunity cost where you spend time rezoning, you don't spend time building more units.
Yeah.
And so I think that is number one, is figuring out the pre-development cycle of how do we lower the barrier for zoning, lower the barrier for use of more sites. And that includes infrastructure, like making sure cities' infrastructure is lined up. We had to, on one of our most recent projects, like, inherit an infrastructure project for the entire neighborhood. And they said, well, it's just whoever develops next in this
True.
area has to pay for this. I'm like, but we're using 4% of the new
Yeah.
capacity. Why are we paying for
Yeah.
such a high percentage of it? And it's just things like that that just don't quite make sense, that end up, cost the project an extra $1.5 million that we didn't have in the budget. And so And then you're asking for more grant funds from the city, when in essence, you're kind of like, you're paying the city in one hand and you're asking for more funds in the other hand. It just seems like there's smarter ways to attack that, where we can be holistic in our infrastructure and holistic in our zoning, so that we're creating less barriers at the local level and the state level to allow for more development on the front end.
And then every time you layer another piece of that funding, I've heard people call it the funding lasagna. Every time you layer that, you're also delaying it and adding more costs and complexity too. So there's another piece of that. In the example you listed, when you go back and you're like, okay, now I need more, whatever it is, CDBG infrastructure money, whatever.
Right.
You're like, okay, now here we go. Now I've just added more time. I've added more regulations,
Exactly.
et cetera. So that's some good insight, because to the novice mind, you want to just say, well, hey, there's land. Hey, there's underutilized land. Go out and build it. And they're looking to developers to solve it. And developers are echoing exactly what you just said. And I like the zoning piece of this too, because the local control can be your biggest impetus for doing the deal, or it could be the thing that kills it, doesn't it? And we don't usually like to, highlight how much influence those local zoning boards are, quite frankly. So I appreciate you bringing that into the conversation as well. And it does place some burden on somebody outside of DC to solve this, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest reason why, it's not a fix all. Every community's different, every neighborhood's different. But at the same time, we need leadership at every level. So how do we do that at scale, and how do we do that quickly? Because we're already behind, 7 million plus units. So how do we get all these different communities and all these different localities
Yeah.
to act in a big enough manner that actually helps address the root issue of just not creating enough housing?
hmm So, one final question, because I think we could go on here for 2 hours, because this is fascinating to me. Um, but I'm curious, do you see your model being able to be expanded or replicated nationally? I know you've got your target markets here, but what, if you're going to vision cast for the future, or nudge, as we've been saying,
Right.
other regions, would you like to talk about that for a minute?
Yes. Yeah. We've really honed in on exactly the type of development and the type of impact we want to have through our developments here in Nashville. We've done over 1,200 units to date, and really gotten a great track record here. But looking at like our big, hairy, audacious goal is to create or preserve 100,000 affordable units, and which is a massive, it's kind of a crazy goal, but I think that's what helps push us, myself and our team, to be able to see like, hey, if we really want to help solve this housing crisis, we have to be thinking at scale. And also for us, our model is not built on cookie cutter. We don't want to make the same building in the same
Yeah.
place, or put it all over the country. We want to make it so that each development has some aspect that is unique to that community and listens to the community and addresses whatever their specific needs are. And so that is where I think we'll find will be the hardest part of us being able to replicate this. But I think that's the problem that I think is most exciting for us, is figuring out how do we replicate at scale, but make each community unique and address the needs of that community, and work with local partners like nonprofits to help provide the services. And I think that's what's been fun throughout this, is figuring out a scalable uniqueness.
Mhm.
And so we're actively working on our next development in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, great. Great
Um,
community there.
yes,
Yes.
yeah, we're super excited about that. And I'm originally from Cincinnati, so we'll probably be looking
Uh-huh.
across Ohio. and really throughout the Southeast in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia as well. But really, I think long-term, figuring out how do we take this model to every community across the country and work with local partners to help make that happen.
Excellent. Well, we wish you Godspeed on getting to those 100,000 units. So thank you for your time. Again, I've been talking with Evan Holladay, the founder and CEO of Holladay Ventures. Evan, we appreciate what you're doing and look forward to hearing you guys accomplish those next phases of future growth.
Thank you so much for having me on, Katie.
Thanks for listening to ChangeMakers with Katie Goar. To find out more about Katie, go to quadel.com. That's QUADEL.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.